So, what I wanted to talk about now is people's opinion of the reserve list and the misconceptions about vintage players, legacy players, pretty much anyone that can afford expensive cards on the reserve list. And a lot of the people that have these opinions, they're either new players or they just don't understand basic economics, because they're the same people that they don't understand. Oh, look, we have Eternal Masters, and they were like selling out of pre-orders that they had a point where they had to cancel them because they couldn't afford them, and they just weren't printing enough of it. And also, they printed like two cards from Legacy that aren't on the reserve list, but again, extremely expensive, over 100 each. And Caracas at the time, I think, was over 100, and I know definitely Force of Will at the time was over 100. People freaked the hell out when these cards were announced that they were going to be reprinted. They freaked the hell out. The price of each individual box was like the MSRP just like drove up because of the shit. People freaked the hell out, and that's what happened with a couple cards that were not on the reserve list but were worth over 100. And not to mention, they also reprinted like Jace the Mind Sculptor and that shit, which I don't understand why they did that, but who the hell cares? I didn't buy any cards from that set anyway, so I don't care. But a lot of people don't understand why the reserve list is here, why they can't do anything about it, but yet they can just sit back and look at this shit happen right in front of them, and they're going to complain, why don't they just do a Vintage Masters set in real life? Because it's too damn expensive. If they put any of the Power 9 in the set at all, they could literally just put the worst one. They could put Time Twister, which I'm saying worst one because out of the Power 9, that is the worst one. And they could put just that one in a Vintage Masters set in paper, because there's a Vintage Masters on MTGO. I don't want there to be any confusion. But having an actual paper version of Vintage Masters and have just one of the Power 9, in this case, Time Twister, and the price of the entire set would be fucking ridiculous. It would be astronomically expensive compared to Eternal Masters when that was overhyped. It turned out to be kind of a shitty set overall because the only money in the set was the mythics, and you only got like a couple of those per box because there's only like 24 booster packs per one of these master sets, and usually you don't get your money back when only a couple of those, especially for spending more than $300, which again, the price for a lot of the Eternal Masters boxes were overhyped. The set was overhyped. The price was incredibly it skyrocketed for the reasons that, we see Caracas and Force of Will getting reprints, and Force of Will got a new artwork and all that shit too. And people freaked the hell out. So naturally, the set's going to skyrocket in price without people even seeing the rest of it. Pre-orders got canceled. We all know the nightmare and hell that was. But people are still urging Wizards to experiment with vintage cards that are never supposed to be reprinted anyway. They're not going to. They're on the reserve list. That's the point of the reserve list. If you don't understand that, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, basic economics. The price that they are at right now, there's no logical way that you can do this and make the format vintage accessible to new players. There's no way you can do that. In fact, there is a way technically, but it's MTGO, make the cards significantly less expensive, but again, the players are complaining about, hey, I don't have these cool collectible cards, like players that have only been playing for a year. I haven't been playing that long, but I have the ability to respect the fact that some players have been playing this game since it first started, because I have a lot of Dungeons and Dragons players that said, hey, this should be pretty good too. Let's try out the card game, and they've been collecting it ever since. And they complained about it very early on, so they then made the reserve list, and it's been a collectible ever since. And people are complaining because now the cards are worth thousands of dollars, and they're like, oh no, I want these cards too. I want these cards. I'm like 16 years old and I've only been playing the game for a year, but I want these expensive cards. I don't understand how the economy works. I mean, seriously, they're not going to do it. People freak the hell out over a couple cards that were worth over $100 getting reprinted. What the hell do you think is going to happen when you're talking about $1,000 cards getting reprints? You're not going to get it anyway. If you're complaining about the rich people getting into vintage, those are the only people that can afford to play vintage. You always hear this. Oh, only the elite can play vintage and all this shit. Who do you think is going to be able to afford to buy the products you want that are stupid, that are filled with these expensive $1,000 reprints? Who do you think is going to afford this? Guess what? The elitist rich players, which again is another misconception. Literally, the player base for vintage isn't just these rich assholes that get into the game for no reason. It's filled with players who have been playing the game a long time to acquire these cards. If you don't believe me, I literally have met people who have been playing this game since it started, since they were kids, and they've held on to cards, and they have many regrets because a lot of the cards they've trashed were dual lands that they used as proxies for basic lands, because back in fucking the time of like alpha and beta, they didn't make as many of the basic lands, so they used dual lands. They like people, they wrote on bayous, they said like swamp and shit, because they couldn't find any actual basic lands. So they said, okay, we're just going to proxy swamp onto a dual land. So that's what happened. So again, have some understanding and perspective when it comes to the economy. Understand that there is a logical reason why they're not going to reprint cards on the reserve list. It's not because they're trying to piss you off. It's because it makes absolutely no sense. Oh, wow. I take this subject really seriously. But again, subscribe. Thanks for watching. Try to get more content out like this. But again, thank you.